Hello and welcome to another episode of Lockdown Dads. I am James Miller, author of Dads Don't Babysit, editor of workingdads.co.uk and father of two children. And as ever, I'm joined by...
Ian Dinwiddie. I'm the founder of Inspiring Dads, a coaching business that helps stressed dads to balance work and fatherhood. A couple of children, they are 11 and 8. And today, unlike yesterday, I actually gave them their coats to take into school. So yesterday, a bit of a parenting fail. Bit of a giggle about that. Actually, my wife was just laughing at me. So today they'll be dry, hopefully. Yeah. Yesterday, not so good.
It's not your fault. It's the weathermen's fault. It's all the weathermen's fault. Don't start me on the weathermen. This could be a half-hour rant about weathermen. You don't want that to happen because we haven't got a guest this week. So I could fill it with a half-hour rant about weathermen, but we're not going to. We're going to look back over Series 3, which I think is very worthwhile. I appreciate there might be people listening and watching going, oh, what? They haven't got anybody from Coldplay this week or whatever. No, it's just us. But so much has changed since we started this series back in January that it's a worthwhile exercise to look back at who we had on, what we've learned, what's changed, because a lot of change has changed in terms of gender issues in that time. Yeah. But let's start with the usual, though. I think it's still worth doing. Ian, how are you?
Yeah, good. Busy this week. Been developing my new signature course. Actually, it's morphed into 3 signature courses, all about helping stressed dads to balance work and fatherhood. There's a new Dads Accelerator, the Working Dads Accelerator, and the 6 Steps to Working Dad Success has made a return. So yeah, working with a few corporates. Having designed all these things, I now have to complete writing them and record the video. So that's been very exciting. Busy from a work point of view. So. From that point of view, 2021 is looking up in terms of more work, because actually, to be honest, the last year has been a little bit rubbish if you're in the coaching industry generally. So so still plenty of time to do the podcast, which I think is important. We had a bit of a COVID scare at school. 2 year 6 pupils tested positive. They were asymptomatic, the family, but because of the timing, it was just before the weekend. Nobody had to stay at home, so school's still in. So that's been good. And I've excited. It's not really exciting at all. I've restarted Couch to 5K. I started at 6:15 on Monday morning, and I've done 3 this week. Nothing is broken yet. None of my, no kind of muscular issues. No, my foot hasn't swelled up, which is what stopped me last time I went running. So yeah, I feel like Joe Wicks always says, I feel amazing.
Yeah, don't talk to me about Joe Wicks. I don't like Joe Wicks anymore in a big way. I want to do a Couch to 5K, but I can't yet because of me back. I'm going to have to go right back to the beginning again. Really annoying. But my boy says he'll do it with me this time, so that could be some interest. It could be a tip for Series 4 there. Do Couch to 5K with your son, but don't take that as a tip yet because I haven't road tested it. Literally road tested. That'll happen hopefully on the other side of Easter. But had some physio today. Finally got some physio on my back. So, hopefully that will happen on the other side of Easter. The man's offering us magic that he's going to make it better.
Physio's great. I'm a big fan of physio. I've had a lot of physio in the last 4 years, all on different parts of my body. Both of my legs, but different parts.
It's very expensive. That's my main problem with physio. It comes back to the same thing I've been talking for the last few weeks when we do How Am I? It is a drag. It's a fag. It does affect your mood. But I don't know. Things are looking up. Here we are. We must have started this right at the start of lockdown, and we're finishing it with another unwinding of lockdown. As we record, it's going to be next week, but when this goes out, it will have already happened, and we'll all have been in the park.
Or something.
People are already, but
I'm not sure I notice.
Again, it's kind of, isn't it? Your physical health has obviously an impact on your mental health, but the whole lockdown thing has an impact on your mental health as well, doesn't it? The similarity there. They're increasingly becoming mixed up in my mind. The issue of my back and lockdown is getting quite weird, really, how closely they're getting entwined in my brain. But hopefully, both will be better. And then when we come back for Series 4, there you go, sneak in that. Did I just sneak in a massive announcement there? We'll be well, but we will still be locked down. So we will still be called Lockdown Dads because lockdown doesn't end till June the 21st completely, if at all.
Yes, at the I was going to say at the earliest, but if at all also works, I think, James.
Well, it will eventually, yes. Okay, but if at all, I don't know. Yeah, all right. If at all was a Go for it. Well, I don't know. Maybe it won't. Maybe it will go on forever. But yeah, like I say, the lockdown thing obviously has a big impact on your mental health and all the rest of it. How long have we been doing this? 10 weeks, this series?
Something like that. We've got 4, 5, 6. I should have counted before. More than 10. So we started with Louise Goss. Was first one back, first week in January, and she was the founder of The Homeworker. And so she was magazine, and she was very much talking about, and we were very much talking about sort of what it's like to be working from home. That kind of, it's not working from home in the traditional sense. It's kind of blended working from home. Certainly, if you've got your kids around, and challenges around not being able to do anything other than be in the home. I think that's one of the things that's become really interesting over the last sort of 3 months or so. Is this kind of this societal clash between organizations and people who believe that everyone needs to be in the office pretty much full time, going back to where they were, and some people who wouldn't want to go into the office at all, and actually the majority of people somewhere in the middle, where a hybrid model. And I think we're seeing a clash of cultures at the moment. I don't know how much you think that's defining some of the conversations at the moment in terms of what the return to the office is. We're talking about, I guess, return to work generally, but office-based work in particular.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously one of the big changes we've seen since we were work from home. I don't know when they're going to lift the work from home order, but it's certainly coming, because obviously I think yesterday, we've seen the stuff from Rishi Sunak saying everyone should go back to the office. I think that's my worry about all this. What's his name? Stephen Bush in the New Statesman sent in his morning email today was pointing out that if businesses tell people to work from home, that's not actually flexible working. You're not giving people the option, which is true. And it's always nice to see somebody catching up with what I've been saying for ages, which is that 9 to 5 is a perfectly acceptable way to work if that's what works for you. Yeah. But it needs to be an option amongst a whole range of options. That's actual flexible working. But what worries me is that it's exactly that. It's your man from Goldman Sachs. Jeez, he seems like a right ninny. But he is back.
Goldman Sachs, what can you say? I mean,
back again.
No offense to the people I know.
Yeah, he said it was an aberration, and then he was back again this week, wasn't he? Giving it all that go. Everyone needs to get. It was the people who had pointed out that they'd worked 100-hour weeks and had raised this with him, and he was like, "Oh yeah, we'll look into that, but you need to go the extra mile."
Yeah, he wasn't. I didn't get the impression they were actively looking into it until somebody leaked it. Because that presentation apparently dates from 2 or 3 months ago, so it wasn't something that was top of their agenda. And there are cultures, certainly American banks, I think, are some of the worst cultures you can imagine in terms of balance, and that's why they call it compensation rather than salary in some industries, because you're compensated for the nonsense. But even so,
that worries me. It's where the power balance is in all this that concerns me. Is that you've got the chancellor, you've got the head of Goldman Sachs saying get back to the office. Meanwhile, on the other side, you've got the man. No, not the man at all. It's the man who's saying get back to the office. You've got the man in the streets, the working dad in the streets, who is, or not in the street because he's staying at home just now, but he's going to be in the street once we're allowed to be in the street, saying, actually, I'd quite like to have some options here. And, the power imbalance is such that that's only going to end one way. I think we really need to be alert to that and thinking about how we, the only way to counter that is to work together, is to for working dads, for parents, for all the ordinary people who want some flexibility to team up to provide a counterbalance to the Chancellor and the head of Goldman Sachs and all these sort of characters. I don't see that happening at the moment, and I'd very much like to be part of it, but we need to think about how we do counter that, I think.
And there are these mixed messages in terms of, I mean, I must admit, I didn't realise Rishi Sunak had made that announcement until I saw the Daily Mash email, which is a comedy email about reasons why Rishi would like you to return to work. And I think the last one was something to do with donors and property developers in London who needed to prop up the Conservative Party. So that was the first thing I heard of it, rather than the announcement. So I figured there was something there. But I think there's something. I think it's interesting sort of where it's going, because the government are still consulting, aren't they, James, on whether to enshrine the right for sort of flexible working or remote working in law. I mean, these consultations can go nowhere very slowly. So whether there's anything in that at all, but you do get these sort of mixed messages, and certainly it's difficult to separate out what is, it's difficult to get a clear understanding, I think, about what will actually happen and how much pressure will be on in different places.
Yeah, and it all matters because there was that Cambridge research that was out at the weekend in which I covered on working dads. I didn't put the thing about the government is mulling making flexible working a day one right on working dads because it wasn't actually news. It was just, as you say, it's just what does that actually mean? Come back with some genuine proposals or whatever, and then I'll write about it. But yeah, I put some stuff in the Cambridge stuff that found that working 1 day a week is actually the happiest people work 1 day a week. Slightly dodgy because they're working 1 day a week and getting furlough for the rest of the week seemed to be what was going on. So they weren't having to worry about pay, as I understood it. But you get the benefits of having meaningful work just from 1 day a week. You don't need to. They thought 3 or 4 days a week was going to be the optimum for your happiness and mental health. But actually, 1 day a week is quite enough. But the point they made, it was interesting that they made it, is that this is about gender equality. This is about if men who are wedded to that 5 day a week, 40-hour a week or whatever, they can reduce it. They will be happier if they do. And of course, they'll be around the house more, doing more domestic work, freeing up their partner to pursue her career. And then we move towards gender equality. And that is what this is all about. Sometimes the flexible working stuff is important. But again, I think as we go forward and we are hopefully out there making the case for it, and by we, I don't mean just you and me, I mean those of us who are in the favour of gender equality, and if you're not, then what the hell are you doing listening to this? Need to keep eyes on the prize, which is gender equality. Flexible working is a means to an end. I think we always need to keep an eye on that. One of the other big changes, of course, in the last since we started this, is that we don't have any children around the house anymore. I mean, it's only been a few weeks, but you sort of forget that when we did this back in January, we were pitched right back into homeschool. And at the last minute, of course, this wonderful government turned around at the very last minute and said, actually, close the schools after 1 day in some cases.
Yeah, sometimes.
And that just blew everything apart. I think, one of the things I've noted down is we're going to talk about our challenges over the last few weeks. And that was a huge challenge. Obviously, we were ready to go to some extent, having done it before. It wasn't such a leap in the dark. But I think also, and certainly in my case, I was aware that there was a very strict limit on what I'd be able to do whilst homeschool was in, which I suppose it was a good in a way, in that I didn't beat myself up about stuff that I couldn't do because I knew what was coming. But there's always that nagging, I could be doing work, I could be trying to get work, as you say. Sounds like your work is again beginning to pick up because basically your kids have gone back to school and you can get on. And hopefully that is the end of homeschool forever. But I wouldn't put any money on it.
No, I wouldn't. I mean, I'm ticking that off. So kids at school, that's tick off. It's like this podcast bingo. Kids at school, return to the office. There's two of them. I'm looking for the third one. Oh no, I've already got the third one. Debate about what it looks like. I mean that's the fundamental biggest thing. It's kids have really enjoyed being back at school. And I enjoy having the freedom to choose exactly what I do during the day, and I can do a lot more. I mean, ultimately you can do more when you haven't got children, regardless of what age they are, sort of being in the house.
But it was also a big issue. It was a big moment. I think this term or this series, however you want to chop off the last 3 months, has been particularly interesting in terms of the impact of homeschool on the household. Now, for you and I, presumably tended to lead on homeschool. Obviously, in most households that was not the case, and that's again the stats aren't completely clear on that, but certainly we know women were doing more in terms of domestic work and in terms of homeschooling. But were they doing more this time compared to the first period of homeschooling? Again, probably. It seems like men quite enjoyed it, got involved in the first lockdown. This one came along, and it was like, it's not such a novelty anymore. I don't particularly want to be involved. A lot of men, again, not all men, and we might talk about that as a hashtag shortly. But there's that. I think again, that's a slightly worrying sign that those of us who are up for gender equality, need to be aware of that. Men seem to have the choice to some extent, and women don't, and that is clearly a pretty fundal. a pretty fundamental inequality.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's Office of National Statistics data, and two of our previous guests not from this season, from previous seasons gone by, John Adams and Dr. Jasmine Kelland, and they were talking about this on a LinkedIn Live a week or so ago, a couple of weeks ago now, and Jasmine had been doing research with parents and have been looking at, and about 120 parents for so the next phase. I think of parenting in the pandemic is the research piece overall. But what she was finding in terms of the equality, the self-reported equality from both men and women, was actually that it was much more equal in terms of division of labour, paid and unpaid, than any of the Office of National Statistics data shows. And part of that might be because that cohort self-select, or perhaps men are more aware of actually a light is being shone on how we're living and what I'm doing as a man, and am I doing enough? And maybe just by shining a light on the challenges and some of the inequalities and the assumptions that we have about who does what at home, in particular talking about childcare, really, from the case of dads, and there's a bit of elements of mental load and generally organising the house, project managing the house. Then whether just by shining a light on it, men become more aware of it, and actually it's a case of actually I'm not doing as much as I thought I was, or that sort of thing. So it was interesting that there's such a big difference between Jasmine's research and the overall picture, which isn't that promising, really.
No, I love that sort of stuff, though, because you can go, oh well, Jasmine's stuff doesn't match up with the official statistics, therefore it's rubbish. I mean, you could do that if you're an idiot, but actually, I like that the gap in between is actually where the interesting stuff is. Like, why does her research not match up with it? What's going on? It is self-study. That's interesting, actually, and it's certainly her research is top quality. She's one of the few people out there doing it, isn't she? Which is always good. I mean, you mentioned some previous guests there, obviously from previous series. Who stood out in this series? I mean, everyone's been good. And to be fair,
everyone's been good.
Everyone has been good. I mean, I was looking back through all the episodes the other day, and I was like, oh, we have some pretty good guests. I haven't really had any dumpers. We're still doing pretty well. But any that stood out in this last series?
So I really enjoyed our conversation with Nathan McGurl. Her early adopter of blogging. I thought he was I really enjoyed the conversation, just his dry wit and his humour, and he was describing what it was like to be sort of almost like a dad pioneer in many ways, in terms of he was sort of stay-at-home dad in 2000, I think it was, when that just wasn't something that was happening, and he went on to found a really interesting business about called the Study Buddy. And so I really enjoyed his conversation. And Dan Stanley, Better Men, founder of Better Men, a coaching business, his analogy about the difference between a rut and a hole, a rut and a grave, was how far you sort of dug down, and that was for me quite evocative. I mean, and a couple of my other sort of favourites are people I know, Rhian from last week, Rhian Mannings, and then Will Champion, who is a pleasure to have him on, and learn a little bit about a little bit of celebrity stardust, and learn about how four men in a band keep it going and keep that relationship going, and the masculinities that are involved in Coldplay, and the sense of gratitude in many ways that he had for the opportunity to work with your mates and still get on, and finding ways of doing that, and that work-life balance element that you perhaps dismiss it. It's easy to dismiss when you look at people who are that successful and financially that successful, but actually they were very deliberate about their work-life balance as well, in a way that a lot of men do try and do the same as well. So I think there was a lot of crossover in those ones. What about you, James? What sort of caught your eye? What sort of good memories for you?
Will Champion was a fascinating one. I mean, obviously he stands out because again, I sort of you think of the guests we've had, he stands out because he's obviously at a different level of celebrity to anybody else we've had on. Yeah. But then I sort of looked at the other guests. I was like, actually, they've all been good. Actually, we've had lots of good guests, and people from all sorts of walks of life. But yeah, I mean, Will was really interesting because obviously we had him on because he's famous. Let's face it. But actually, it's the one I come back to time and again. I have to say, I mean, I wrote something about it off the back of it for Working Dads. But just as you say, that stuff around having the right people doing the right job. He said, he has no interest in being the front man. The man who does that, and everyone's quite happy for him to do that, and he just, is a sort of very grounding influence at the back playing the drums sort of thing. And I was like, it applies to business, it applies to families. There was just so much read across in that that I was not expecting. You know, there's lots of interesting stuff about being a celebrity dad and all that sort of thing, but there was so much read across in that as well. Always like speaking to Brian Ballantyne, very much a pioneer in this area, very humble pioneer in this area, but he's very switched on and very very wise, actually, is quite a good word for him on this sort of stuff. And you mentioned Louise Goss. I quite like that one because, you know, there was some practical stuff about homeworking and, you know, the risk of being all man about it. The practical stuff is quite important. I mean, there was other issues in there as well. But again, it's been another good series. Lots of, there has not been a duffer in there. Yeah, and Rhian Mannings from last week was interesting one. I mean, you know, as I said on LinkedIn, it's a tragic story, and yet we had quite good fun recording it, which doesn't seem right. But there you go. It says a lot about her, I think. Maybe it says something about us as well. Let's take a little bit of credit, but I think it says more about her. That made it, you know, it was very, very interesting episode. And then we're going to have some more after Easter. We've got some more good guests.
I think so. If we've booked them and asked them, we've started asking people, I think, haven't we?
Yeah, we'll have good. There's a good wish.
We've got a long list. We've got a much longer. For anyone watching this who wants to be on the podcast, then we do actually have a much longer list at the moment, and we can possibly squeeze in. We need to run several seasons to squeeze everyone in. So it's a tricky one.
That sneaks in. Nice. But I mean, who knows what we'll be talking about next series, whatever we're going to call them. But I do think, I mean, we've talked about what's changed in this last 10 weeks. And I think one of the things that we sort of haven't spoken about yet in any detail, partly because we have guests on and obviously we want to talk about their stories, is the discussion around gender equality, which has obviously shot up the news agenda, which is a good thing, obviously in tragic circumstances. But, you know, as with so many things around the last year, I'd rather we weren't talking about it and the bad thing hadn't happened in the Sarah Everard case, but it has, and we are talking about it. So it's really interesting where we are now with that. And I suppose what I want to happen now is that the discussion continues. I know that it's quite a difficult discussion for a lot of people, obviously for a lot of women who are affected by it, and for a lot of men who don't like the idea that somehow men are you know, the enemy or the baddies, or however you want to phrase it, and
or at best complicit in some ways.
You know,
to a culture that makes it okay for sort of microaggressions to be there, which then lead into other much more serious crimes, I think.
Yeah, and if, you know, talk to your sons, and sort of, you know, nobody looks at their son and thinks, well, he's probably a rapist, but you know, you've got to talk to your sons and your daughters. You know, gender equality, you know, is everyone's lookout. I mean, I know there are people out there who will say gender equality is not a thing. Somehow the genders are different, and so it should be. I can't really engage with that. But the stuff the reason we do this and the stuff we talk about is precisely to get to gender equality. I mean, one of the things I wrote was that, you know, if men are around the house more, their children grow up with a more gender equal outlook. Those children that have a gender equal outlook will not go out the house and objectify a woman, or, you know, attack a woman, or let their friends do that if they're boys, you know. And that's why it matters. You know, how do you make the connection from, you know, the vigil on Clapham Common to being able to do flexible working? Well, there's the connection. It is there, and, you know, it's a big picture. And it's not going to be solved by bloody lampposts. This government has gone, let's put up some more lampposts as if that will solve it and that will make everybody go away. It's not okay. It's not acceptable. We need to do more. And again, it's on us. I mean, I've already put quite a lot on us to be standing up for flexible working, and us, again, not just us two, but, you know, everybody who's interested. It's on us to make it happen. And I appreciate it's a big responsibility, but
it's. I think we need to move away from that conversation where a man stands up of our kind of age and sort of refers to himself as a husband or as a father of daughters. And it shouldn't take being a husband or being a father of daughters to understand that there are fundamentally things that are wrong in some parts of male behaviour that have to be addressed, and they have to be addressed, early. And understanding about consent for both men and women is really, really important in teaching our sons in particular about consent. And this idea about, it was something that was in the OECD report, wasn't it, Man Enough, where they've talked about, and this is something we talked about briefly last week, or you did, James, in particular. I had a look at some of the write-up about it, and this idea around sort of men in the household being sort of responsible in some way for the sexual activity of the women in the house. This idea that somehow a man is responsible for his daughters. In this kind of, and it's quite an old-fashioned way of looking at things. And this idea of threatening, or low-level threatening of a new boyfriend, like, I'm the man and don't you dare touch my daughter, and this sort of thing. And what it does is it engenders this sense that men are responsible for women's sexuality in some way. And I think that's a dangerous place to go. And I reflect back to when I asked Lisa to marry me in a very cack-handed way, quite frankly. We laugh about it a lot, and it's not a story for today. But I didn't ask Lisa's dad for permission. I thought that was totally, even then, we're going back to 2006 or 7, I guess. Should know, but 6 or 7, we'll keep it loose like that. I didn't ask Alex for permission because I didn't think that was right. But a lot of my friends were very much like, I can't believe you turned your back on that kind of traditional view of asking permission. It's like, well, it's not, and I said to Alex, I said, no, I didn't ask for permission. He said, well, it's not really my permission to give. And I think that's really important, it's all tied into the same kind of concept, and we need to be careful about what kind of messaging that we create, probably inadvertently, in the home in terms of consent and responsibility around sort of sexuality and that sort of thing. I think it's important to be mindful of that at the very least.
Yeah, I mean, this is you've got to challenge it wherever you see it, and it's all around. I mean, well, we know it. It is unfortunately all around, and maybe that's something to explore in the next series or another series going forward. Is stuff like that. Is how do we challenge it? Because one of the things, as you know, I am now entirely in Ian Leslie's cult of conflicted and how to disagree well. But, how do you bring people on board? If a man has been a big mad sexist and then he has daughters and changes his view, brilliant, come on board. He says, but how do we then say, okay, welcome aboard. We all want the same thing. You have come to this because you've got a daughter. We've come to it through other routes. How do we all move in the same direction, or all put our heft behind, the same cause? And that is a tricky one, and I don't know the answer, and we haven't got that much time, unfortunately, on this episode. But I think it's something we will come back to: is how do you, spot those opportunities and maximise them and move things forward? Oh, there goes the email. I forgot to turn my email off again. But there is your first tip for this week. If you're on a Zoom call, turn your email off first. Not a tip that I follow. I don't know why I'm giving that one out. But, I'm trying to think. I don't know if I can remember half of the tips we've had across. I remember the bad ones. I can't remember the good ones.
Oh, maybe, ours?
Maybe we shouldn't look at the highlights tips. Maybe we should just move on to our own tips for this week.
We could do. I have got a list of things. I kind of we had some kind of classic ones around putting the phone away, making sure getting help is a strength, often not a weakness. It takes strength to seek out help. Cherishing those small moments. That was another important one. Will Champion had a great one. Listen to podcasts. There are great podcasts out there, which I think was, it's like total. That's kind of meta, isn't it? That is just kind of go on a podcast and recommend listening to podcasts.
That was my tip when we had Will on, was make a playlist, and that was actually a really good one, because you carve out some time for yourself, and you can sort of wallow in whatever you were listening to when you were 14 and stuff. But you're doing something, so it's kind of okay. I got a lot of time for that.
It's better than my tip that week.
I'm not even going to mention your tip. I wasn't going to mention your tip that week, because that was easily, with all due respect, the worst tip. It's a good tip. It was the most incongruous tip. That's what it was. It was the most incongruous tip when you've got an international rock star on. It's a good tip, It's just the time. It just seems a bit odd. But I was going to flag it off, and then I was like, well, last week I suggested you take pictures of your children while they're sleeping, and that was fully bad, to be honest. Right? It's sort of bad. I just framed it.
Has its moments.
I framed it wrong. It's both of them are actually perfectly good tips. They just didn't, not quite in the right moment.
I think Steve Miles' tip, which was around mindfulness and the joy of the craft box, I think was much more much more grounded than some of them. So I like that. Other one, what else do we have? Language. Paul Bulis talked about the language of gaming, and it wasn't so much about gaming per se, but it was taking the time to understand the world that your kids are inhabiting and connect with them and ask good questions and really concentrate and pay attention. That sense of, Nigel Clark talked about putting the phone away. So once you put the phone away, focus on what the children are doing and understand what they're in and let them tell you stories about what they're up to.
That's a really good one about the gaming, actually, because recently, with the weather being a bit nicer, the kids have been down the playground, and I've been talking to some other parents, illegally probably, because it'll be illegal next week, but not then. There's been a lot of talk about screen time and Fortnite and all this sort of stuff, and that's fine. But I think again, Paul's tip is quite good. Is it talk to your children about it? So are the adults going, Fortnite's a bit mad, isn't it? Is it good? Is it bad? It's like, well, personally, it's whatever it is. It's a rated 12 or 13, so I'm not going to encourage anybody to go anywhere near it before that age. Yeah. But if you are, then talk to your kids about what's going on in it. I think that's the way to take the potentially nasty edges off it. Anyway, while we're on tips. Who's going to go first? You can go first. Go on, Ian. What's your tip?
I've got a book tip, and hopefully I can get. If I get the angle right and the light. Oh, I've got such bright light today.
Where's Parsons?
Okay, so this is Rob Parsons. It's called The Heart of Success: Making it in Business Without Losing in Life. This has been around for a while. It's a good, easy read. It's not particularly it's not aimed at men at all. It's just about this idea about putting your ladder. And there's a picture of it. It's really not coming up on this at all, is it? No. There's a ladder. There's a ladder there. Can't get it. There you go. Oh, there you go. That's better. If I hold it like that. There's a ladder on the front for those people listening on the podcast. There's a ladder, and it's all about putting your ladder against the right wall and being deliberate about how you design your life, or your working life, really. So your work-life balance, and however you integrate your work and life, and it works for you. It's about being deliberate, and it's very much written in a story. There's a professor and a young student, and they discuss these things, and that's how it's written. It's good. It's a classic, actually. It's a classic of its genre. It's not particularly woo-woo as some of these books. Sorry, woo-woo. That's what we used to call it when I worked in W.H. Smith. Yeah. Mind, Body, Spirit, and Health books, when I was in the books buying team, was affectionately known as woo-woo. Yeah. So it's not woo-woo. It's a good read. So yeah, Rob Parsons, The Heart of Success.
It's a good one, which is going to make mine seem all the more ridiculous, unfortunately. It's a good parenting tip, right? It's a proper dad's one, proper work, So it's going to be Easter, right? That means Easter eggs. Easter eggs before Easter last year. We were getting Easter eggs for like 10p after Easter. It was amazing because the shops all bought them in and then nobody went to the shops. It was brilliant. But the tip around Easter eggs is teach your children this. What is the best way to open an Easter egg? It is, of course, to smash it on your head. Teach your children, when they get their Easter egg, get the old camera out so you put it on Facebook and all the family will love it. And you go, smack. That breaks the Easter egg. Becomes a great family tradition. One member of my family did it, and now everyone does it. Whenever they open an Easter egg, they smash it on their head. And there are videos. There'll be loads of videos for the next month on Facebook, whenever Easter moves around, of members of my family smashing Easter eggs on their head, and it cheers everybody up. They're hollow. I don't think you need solid egg. If you do, don't smash that on the head. Really hurt. But if you've got a hollow egg, smash it on your head to open it for Easter, and it will make everybody happy.
If you've got a really expensive one as well, the chocolate might just be too thick. So yeah, I think you'll be
The expensive ones don't have any thicker chocolate. They're just not. It's almost they just make more money. Same amount of chocolate, don't they? I don't get the ones. I'm quite happy with the cheap one.
It's like a human pinata kind of thing going on, isn't it? I don't know. Yeah, smash. Wow. Not recommended with cream eggs, I guess.
No. It's got to be a big hollow one. But as and when that happens at Easter, maybe we'll be able to post that in the first episode, in the show notes to the first episode of the next series. We might have a video of me smacking an egg on my head or something like that. We'll see how that goes.
That will be quite something. I think that's something for everyone to look forward to.
There's a stupid tip to end the series. It's been quite a 10 weeks. Not that we've all gone completely crackers.
It hasn't dragged at all. The weather is getting better. It's not so great today, but yeah, it is getting slowly better. So yeah, but we will be back. We will be back with, it'll be episode number 40, because this is 39 today. So we will have an episode 40, and we'll do about 7 or 8, I think we've planned, haven't we? For
back at end of April, we're going to be back to where we're at, about a month's time from now, maybe.
Yep.
Yeah.
About that, we'll do some recording. We'll be here on video. We'll be doing our usual things. We'll be conjuring more amazing tips. Our guests generally, they've only got one shot. They only need one shot, one tip, one shot, done. We're on, that's 39 each. I think we should congratulate ourselves, James.
There were some good ones this week, to be fair. I think they were pretty good, different, and both actually good tips. Mark that one up. But yeah, we'll be back with more after Easter.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for watching and listening. Do give it a like and subscribe if you like to see more of our amazing guests as opposed to us, because we only do this a couple of times. We've only done this 3 times, a couple of us, so we'll have new guests next season, and we will roll on with Lockdown Dads, and some stage we will be out of lockdown. So for those of you counting the days down, Lockdown Dads will be here with you. But for the moment, thank you, James, for joining us Friday afternoon, having a chat about all these important topics. And we will both be back next month. I was going to say next week, but it's next month. I'm nearly on autopilot there. We'll be back next month for another episode of Lockdown Dads. Thank you very much for watching and listening.